At my first Mother's Day, my husband chose helping his mom with mulch over our zoo plans. When Father's Day came, he asked, "What can I do to make it up to me?" I smiled and said, "Actually, you've already done enough. I'm just matching your energy." The look on his face was priceless, confusion mixed with dawning realization as I turned back to packing our son's diaper bag. We were heading to my parents' house for Father's Day, just like I'd told him we would. He stood there in our kitchen doorway, still in his pajamas, watching me methodically prepare for a day that wouldn't include him being celebrated. "Wait, are you serious about this?" he asked, his voice carrying that same tone he used when his mother called with her ridiculous requests. The tone that said he expected me to be reasonable, to back down, to make everything smooth and comfortable for everyone except myself. I paused, diaper bag half zipped, and really looked at him. This was my husband of 3 years, father to our 10-month-old son, and the man who had systematically chosen his mother's convenience over his own family's happiness for our entire relationship. Something cold and analytical settled in my chest as I processed what I was really dealing with here. "Tom, let me ask you something," I said, setting down the bag. "On Mother's Day morning, what did you do first when you woke up?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I went to help my dad with the mulch." "Right. And what had I specifically asked for?" "Breakfast in bed and for you to sleep in while I handled feeding the baby." "Exactly. So when your mom called the night before and demanded you come over first thing in the morning, what did you choose?" The silence stretched between us. Our son babbled happily from his high chair, completely oblivious to the fact that his father was finally being forced to confront his priorities. "But my dad needed help, and Mom said it would only take a couple hours." I held up my hand. "Stop. Just stop right there. Do you hear what you're saying? You're still defending the choice to abandon your wife and infant son on Mother's Day because your mommy made a request." The word mommy hit him like a slap. His face flushed red, and I could see him getting ready to argue, but I was done with arguments. I was done with being the understanding wife who accommodated everyone else's needs while mine got trampled. You see, I'm not just some random wife having a tantrum. I'm a project manager for a major consulting firm, and I've spent the last 5 years learning how to identify patterns, analyze behavior, and predict outcomes in complex organizational structures. What I was looking at right now wasn't a marriage problem. It was a systems problem with a clear power hierarchy that needed restructuring. My annual salary is $89,000. I have $34,000 in personal savings, and I own a rental property that generates $1,400 monthly income. More importantly, I understand leverage, negotiation strategy, and how to implement systematic change in resistant environments. Tom had no idea he was dealing with someone who professionally dismantles dysfunctional systems for a living. I'd been documenting patterns in our relationship for months without really realizing it. Every holiday disrupted by Susan's last-minute demands. Every weekend plan canceled because Tom's parents needed something. Every boundary I tried to set that got immediately overruled when Susan applied pressure. The data painted a clear picture. I was married to a man who had never successfully separated from his mother, and she viewed me as competition for her son's attention. But here's what neither Tom nor Susan understood about my professional background. I specialize in change management for family-owned businesses, which means I'm an expert in exactly this type of dysfunctional family dynamic. I know how these systems work, why they persist, and most importantly, how to disrupt them effectively. 3 months ago, I'd completed a project helping a manufacturing company establish boundaries between their board of directors and day-to-day operations. The CEO's mother had been undermining management decisions and creating chaos by going directly to employees with conflicting instructions. Sound familiar? 6 months before that, I'd worked with a retail chain where the founder's wife kept overriding her daughter-in-law's marketing decisions, creating brand confusion and staff frustration. The solution had required establishing clear authority structures, implementing communication protocols, and consequences for boundary violations. I'd also spent 2 years as a mediator for workplace family disputes, which taught me to recognize manipulation tactics, establish non-negotiable parameters, and design accountability systems that actually worked. Susan's behavior followed textbook patterns of controlling family members who couldn't accept reduced influence. My professional network includes family therapists, legal consultants specializing in domestic relations, and executive coaches who work with boundary issues in family businesses. I had resources Tom couldn't even imagine, and more importantly, I understood strategic implementation timelines. But my biggest advantage was psychological. Tom and Susan saw me as the accommodating wife who always eventually gave in to keep the peace. They had no concept that professional me was completely different from personal me. At work, I was known for dismantling resistance, implementing difficult changes, and achieving results that other consultants couldn't deliver. The Mother's Day debacle had triggered something in my analytical mind. As I sat home alone, eating pizza and watching Netflix while my husband spent my first Mother's Day moving mulch for his mommy, I started thinking about this situation like a client problem. The current system was: Susan identifies something she wants. Susan applies emotional manipulation to Tom. Tom chooses compliance over family boundaries. I get angry but eventually accept the situation. System resets until Susan's next demand. This cycle had been operating successfully for years because I kept absorbing the consequences instead of redirecting them back to the decision makers. Classic conflict avoidance pattern that actually enabled the behavior I was trying to stop. That week, I'd started making strategic phone calls. My first call was to Jennifer Davis, a family therapist who specialized in adult children, establishing independence from controlling parents. Jennifer had consulted on several of my workplace projects where family dynamics affected business operations. What you're describing is called emotional enmeshment, Jennifer explained after I outlined the situation. The mother hasn't accepted that her adult son's primary loyalty needs to shift to his nuclear family. She's using guilt and manufactured urgency to maintain her position as his primary decision-making influence. How do I change that dynamic? I asked. You can't change it directly, but you can stop participating in it. Right now, you're absorbing all the negative consequences of his choices, which eliminates his motivation to change. Start redirecting those consequences back to him. My second strategic consultation was with Robert Hayes, an executive coach who worked with family business succession planning. Robert understood the specific challenges of establishing new authority structures when family members resisted change. The key is consistent implementation, Robert told me. You establish clear boundaries, communicate them explicitly, and then follow through with predetermined consequences every single time. No exceptions, no negotiations after the fact. What if he refuses to cooperate? Then you have your answer about his priorities. But most people will adapt to new systems once they understand the consequences are permanent. My third call was to Lisa Bennett, a divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving controlling in-laws, not because I wanted a divorce, but because I needed to understand my legal position if this escalated. Document everything, Lisa advised. Dates, times, specific incidents, financial impacts. If this becomes a pattern that affects your child's well-being or your mental health, you want a clear record of your attempts to address it reasonably. Armed with professional guidance and a clear strategy, I designed what I privately called the Father's Day implementation. It wasn't revenge. It was a strategic demonstration of natural consequences. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Tom had shown me that his version of special occasions involved prioritizing his mother's demands over his family's plans, so I would give him exactly what he'd demonstrated he wanted. A special day where his mother got his attention, and I took our son to spend time with people who actually prioritized our family. but I added a strategic element he wasn't expecting. I wasn't going to be angry, dramatic, or emotional about it. I was going to be completely calm and matter-of-fact, treating this as the natural result of his demonstrated preferences. "Tom, I need you to understand something," I said, turning back to face him in our kitchen. "This isn't punishment. This is me finally accepting what you've shown me about your priorities." "That's not fair," he protested. "Mother's Day was different. My dad really needed help. And I really needed my husband to prioritize our family on my first Mother's Day, but you chose differently, so now I'm choosing differently too." I could see him struggling with this logic. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't quite figure out how to explain why his choice was understandable while mine was unreasonable. "But it's Father's Day," he said weakly. "Exactly. And just like you spent Mother's Day prioritizing what your mom needed, I'm spending Father's Day prioritizing what makes sense for our son and me. We're going to celebrate with my dad, who actually understands that being a father means putting your children first." The truth was, my dad had been furious when I told him what happened on Mother's Day. Not dramatic angry, but that quiet, disappointed anger that meant he'd permanently downgraded his opinion of Tom. My dad had raised 3 daughters while working full-time and had never once chosen his parents' convenience over his children's needs. "Your father-in-law is a grown man who chose to order 300 bags of mulch," my dad had said when I called him that Sunday evening. "If he didn't plan for help, that's his problem, and your mother-in-law knew exactly what she was doing when she called the night before Mother's Day." Now, Tom was getting a first-hand demonstration of what supportive family actually looked like. As we drove to my parents' house, Tom sulked in the passenger seat, while I felt more clear-headed than I had in months. This wasn't about being petty or getting even. This was about establishing a new pattern where choices had consequences, and I stopped absorbing the negative effects of other people's decisions. My parents' house was everything our Mother's Day should have been. My dad grilled burgers. My mom had prepared all Tom's favorite side dishes despite her disappointment in him, and they both focused on making our son laugh and trying to include Tom in conversations. But Tom spent most of the day texting with Susan, who was apparently having a meltdown about us not celebrating Father's Day with them. Every few minutes, his phone would buzz with another message, and each time he'd get more agitated. "She wants to know why we didn't invite them," Tom said during lunch. "Because it's Father's Day, not Grandmother's Day," my mom replied smoothly. "We're celebrating the fathers in our family." "But she feels left out." My dad set down his burger and looked directly at Tom. "Son, let me ask you something. On Mother's Day, did you prioritize your wife's feelings?" Tom's face flushed. "That was different." "How?" The silence that followed was deafening. My dad wasn't being mean, just direct. And Tom had no answer because there wasn't a logical one. Around 3 in the afternoon, Susan called directly. Tom answered immediately, of course, and I could hear her voice through the phone even though he walked into the kitchen for privacy. She was crying, saying she felt abandoned, that she didn't understand why I was being so hurtful. When Tom came back outside, he looked defeated. "She's really upset. She wants us to come over for dinner." "No," I said simply. "But she's crying." She cried on Mother's Day, too, when I told her I had no interest in spending time with people who ruined my first Mother's Day. "Did that change your decision to stay there and finish the mulch?" Tom stared at me. I could practically see his brain working, trying to find a way to make this my fault or my responsibility to fix. "This isn't like you," he said finally. "You're absolutely right. The old me would have given in by now to avoid conflict, but the old me also thought my husband would prioritize our family when it mattered. We've both learned some new things about each other." That evening, as we drove home, Tom was quiet. His phone had been buzzing nonstop with messages from Susan, but he'd finally stopped checking every one immediately. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted as we pulled into our driveway. Fix what? This whole situation. You're angry, my mom's upset, everything feels wrong. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been strategically building toward all day. Tom, I'm not angry anymore. I'm something much worse. I'm clear. I understand exactly what's happening here, and I've decided to stop participating in it. What does that mean? It means I'm done being the person who absorbs all the negative consequences when you choose your mother's feelings over our family's needs. From now on, those consequences are going to land where they belong. So what happens now? I unbuckled our son from his car seat and headed toward the house. Now you get to decide what kind of husband and father you want to be, but you don't get to make that decision consequence-free anymore. The next few weeks proved how effective strategic consequence redirection could be. Susan continued her pattern of manufacturing emergencies that required Tom's immediate attention, but I stopped accommodating the resulting disruptions to our family plans. When she called on a Saturday morning claiming she needed Tom to come over immediately to fix her computer, I took our son to the farmer's market alone instead of waiting around. When she insisted Tom needed to help move furniture on our planned date night, I got a babysitter and went to dinner with my sister instead of staying home disappointed. But the real breakthrough came 3 weeks after Father's Day, when Susan demanded Tom skip our son's first swimming lesson to help her with yard work. I already told her we have plans, Tom said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Good, I replied, continuing to pack the swim bag. But she says it's urgent. I'm sure she does. Tom looked conflicted, and I could see him wavering. This was the moment that would determine whether he'd learned anything from the Father's Day demonstration. What if I just go over there for an hour first? I stopped packing and looked at him directly. Tom, you can make whatever choice you want, but if you choose to prioritize your mother's manufactured emergency over our son's swimming lesson, then you're choosing not to be there for an important milestone. I won't reschedule it, I won't wait for you, and I won't pretend it doesn't matter. That's not fair. What's not fair is expecting me to keep accommodating choices that hurt our family. You want to go help your mom with yard work instead of taking your son swimming? That's your right, but it's also your consequence. For the first time in our relationship, Tom called Susan back and told her he wasn't available. She cried, she guilt-tripped, she claimed he didn't love her anymore, but he held firm. At the swim lesson, watching Tom beam with pride as our son kicked his tiny legs in the pool, I realized something important. This wasn't really about Mother's Day or mulch or swimming lessons. It was about Tom finally understanding that being a husband and father required making choices that sometimes disappointed his mother. The swimming lesson became a turning point. Over the following months, Tom slowly began establishing boundaries with Susan. It wasn't linear. There were setbacks and moments when he reverted to old patterns. But each time, I consistently redirected the consequences back to him instead of absorbing them myself. By our son's first birthday 6 months later, Tom had learned to say sentences like, "We're not available that day," and "That doesn't work for our family." Susan was still pushy and manipulative, but Tom had finally developed the spine to resist her pressure. The birthday party itself became the final test. Susan wanted to take over the entire event, different venue, different guest list, different everything, but Tom looked at her and said, "Mom, this is our son's first birthday. We're doing it our way at our house. You're welcome to come and celebrate with us, or you can choose not to, but we're not changing our plans." She chose to come, though she pouted through most of the party and made several passive-aggressive comments about the decorations. But Tom ignored her negativity and focused on our son, who had a wonderful time smashing cake and playing with his cousins. As I watched my husband finally put our family first, I realized that Father's Day strategy had worked exactly as intended. I hadn't changed Tom through arguments or ultimatums. I'd changed the system by refusing to enable it, and Tom had adapted accordingly. Susan never completely stopped being pushy and demanding, but she learned that her manipulation tactics no longer worked because Tom finally understood that choosing his mother's comfort over his family's needs came with real costs he wasn't willing to pay. She eventually settled into a more respectful grandmother role, though she still occasionally tested boundaries. Tom became the husband and father I'd always known he could be, once he understood that love sometimes means disappointing your mother to protect your family. Our son grew up seeing his father prioritize his nuclear family while still maintaining a respectful relationship with his grandmother. Jennifer Davis continued to provide guidance during our most challenging months, helping Tom develop the communication skills he needed to maintain boundaries without cutting off his relationship with his parents entirely. Robert Hayes worked with Tom on decision-making frameworks that helped him recognize when he was defaulting to people-pleasing instead of making thoughtful choices. Lisa Bennett remained available for consultation, though thankfully we never needed her services beyond that initial strategic planning session. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to change other people. It's to stop participating in systems that hurt you and consistently redirect consequences to where they belong. The Mother's Day that started with abandoned zoo plans and moved mulch became the catalyst for Tom finally growing up and becoming the partner our family deserved. And Father's Day became the day he learned that real fathers choose their children's needs over their mother's demands, even when it's hard.